You're being recorded, just so you know. You can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Can
I got
everyone
the
hear me?
recording going. You want me to share page?
No, I can do it.
Okay,
Hopefully everything works.
okay.
This is it. Okay. So when Moshe came down off of Mount Sinai, it says that something about the Ten Commandments were so holy that it says that light literally emanated from his forehead, actually from his face. And Chazal is an abbreviation for Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha, our great wise rabbis of blessed memory. How did Moshe merit these shining rays of glory? It says, when Moshe was writing the Torah, some ink remained in the quill. Moshe passed the quill over his head, and the rays of glory were evident. It's from the Talmud Tanchuma. So basically, if you look at me, like you're writing with a pen and you go like this, you wipe your brow, and some of the quill ink went over his forehead. Now, regardless, the question is, but weren't the Ten Commandments engraved? But remember when I was telling you there was also the oral?
It's not gonna work. No, not working, Rabbi. You have a problem there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I keep on getting a pop-up, and instead of answering, I closed it. So maybe that will work from now on. So, okay. So this was such a famous verse that Moses had horn. Now, in Hebrew, if you look at this word, Koran or Karen, also means a horn, but it means light, rays of light. So again, we were talking before about the inappropriate translation. Well, that's what happens when you read the King James. The King James, the priests knew that Karen means a horn. So they translate it as horns of light. Now, even though Michelangelo knew a lot of Jewish traditional verses and definitions, in his great Moses, there's a picture on the bottom right, he depicted Moses with horns. And obviously, that's the foundation that Moses had horns, so all Jews have horns. It's really interesting. By a show of hands, and my brother's here, he'll validate this. By a show of hands, how many of you have yourself had non-Jews check you for horns? Or how many of you, Frank Kreutzer, Gilbert, Abe Blazer, our older sisters in Aunt Vi's one-room classroom in our farm town of Alabama, New York, they used to check them for horns. Isn't that correct, David?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's Michelangelo's mistranslation of the Bible of how Moses' writing of the Ten Commandments affected him spiritually. So, that's why I've often, emphasized the danger of mistranslations. Was there a question from everyone?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes, Sarita.
There is the healing that also mentions that Hashem grew a horn into David. So it's like you explained that to me once, that it was not an actual horn.
No. So in Hebrew, Karen also means foundation, like a fund. For example, Karen Kayemet LeYisrael, the Jewish National Fund. That's what Karen means. Now, whoa. Well, here's one. Do you know what a horn of plenty is? You ever see like a Viking horn? That's a horn of coca. What's a horn of coca? Right. So that was that everyone could turn to this horn if they were hungry or they were thirsty, and that's why the word Karen also means a foundation or strength or a source of blessing. It's in many cultures, not just in Judaism, not just in Hebrew. As I just explained, Vikings, Nordic tribes used it, as well as Celtic, Great Britain, the Anglo-Saxons of the North. They actually weren't Anglo-Saxons by definitions, they were Celts. Or the mistranslation here in America, the Celtics of Boston. The correct pronunciation, at least in Great Britain, is Celtic. And that's where the word kilts come, by the way. Kilts are worn by the Celts. So let's get back to next. Okay. Rather than me read, would anyone like to read for us?
Okay, I don't mind, I'll read.
Thank you, Ahuva.
Okay, Hashem, you did the stones and wrote the original 10 commandments on the tablets. Moshe descended Mount Sinai to find the Israelites sinning with the golden calf. In response, he threw down the tablets, destroying them. The Talmud shares the entire Torah and Bible was revealed, including the Mishnah, Talmud, and Agada in the first tablets. When someone writes a Sefer Torah, every letter must be surrounded with parchment. No two letters may touch each other. There is great significance in the space between letters. Whenever a song is written in the Torah, it is written with large gaps, and text appears to be a brick structure. Sometimes in poetry and song, what is written between the lines is more significant than the text itself. The Torah itself is referred to as a song, like in the book of Devarim, chapter 31, passage 19, because there is so much written between the lines. So the notes, although Amsterdam was heavily populated by Sephardim, this Torah was written in Yiddish. And it says, find Moshe, Joshua, and fence around Sinai, and the trumpets. And who are the two men, the bottom right and left?
So allow me to annotate for just a second. So the question, let's do the first one. Find Moses. Where's Moses? Anyone see it?
Up the mountain. Yeah.
Right. So if that's Moses, then who is this?
Joshua.
Very good, Sarita. When Moses heard the cacophony of the sinning of the golden calf, he came down and he said to Joshua, I hear the sound of celebration. And he goes, no, I hear the sound of sinning. So here's Moses. This is from a Yiddish Bible. Now, again, in Amsterdam in the late 1600s, it was heavily populated with Sephardim because they fled from Spain and Portugal. That being said, the question is, now do you see this? This is called the fence around the Torah. Sayag la Torah. So we were told by God to fence off the mountain for 3 days, and no one is allowed to get close to the mountain. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, who do you think this is? I'll give you a hint.
Aaron,
What's he wearing?
maybe Aaron?
Maybe
Kohen
Aaron.
Gadol?
Okay.
Maybe King David.
Okay. King David. Excellent. And by the way, I don't know.
Okay. so
I
it
don't
could be
know the
any-
answer. I thought because it's an actual crown that it was King David, but then what would King David be doing at Mount Sinai?
Right.
And then we're getting into some real heavy mysticism. And if that's King David, then who is this?
How about
The
Aaron?
answer is,
Got a staff.
well, if this is King David, Solomon, his son, or like you said,
Or Samuel.
If this is Aaron, then or Samuel. So the reason why
If
you
King
guys
David,
are
it might be
trending,
Samuel.
correct, and or Aaron, it's really
Moses
interesting.
and Joshua.
I'm sorry.
Moses and Joshua.
So here would be Moses, as you can see,
Joshua's
he
up on
actually
top.
has the 10 Commandments right here on the mountain. And we know that when he came down, he encountered this guy, Joshua. We see the fence. So really, what I really wanted to emphasize in this particular thing was like a crossover of culturalization, that in the late 1600s, Amsterdam was not an Ashkenazi community, it was a Sephardi, but in the late 1600s, they were already printing Yiddish Bibles. Now,
Rabbi, I have another
I just want-
idea.
yeah,
Maybe it's Yitro, Poten Moshe. I told you so with the stick.
really good. Honestly, I don't have the answer. I sent it to one of my good friends who likes to proofread my. So he noticed something interesting. He says that if you look closely, the cherubs are, the one on the right is definitely masculine, but on the one on the left is hermaphroditic. That although the cherub has a penis and testicles, he has enlarged or feminine breasts. So like I started talking to him. I don't see it. I think the cherub on the right also, but you know what? I think it was pretty interesting that if you think about it, and obviously a very, very, very knowledgeable artist did this wood carving or rendering, and it's obviously written properly in Hebrew. There are obviously, whoever did it knew the oral tradition about all these things that we're pointing out, but had no problem on the cover page of a Bible to have a naked angels. And you know what else is interesting? That not only did it have naked angels, but what about the 10 Commandments? You shall make no graven images.
Right.
And here it's on the cover page of and obviously, but it's anachronistic to say Orthodox, because in 1679, there were only two types of Jews. Orthodox, what we would call Orthodox, and assimilated Jews who had turned to Christianity. There was nothing in between. The Reform movement wasn't developed until 1840. That being said, I found this very interesting. I found it on a website of Jewish artistry of the antiquity of Jewish antiquity. So I just thought that was really interesting. So let me
Rabbi,
just.
maybe they come to stress the sin of the golden calf.
Yeah. So
Rabbi,
if you look in their hands, what
And
do
in
they
their
have in
hands,
their
that
hands?
also ask you.
Right. So Murray, my friend, thinks that the right is Hadassim and the left is Aravot, because there's slightly different plants. But that being said, then I said, what, we have to start looking for a lulav, we have to start looking for an etrog, regardless. Are there any other questions before we continue,
yes,
everyone?
Rabbi,
Yes, Sarita.
the cherubim that are on the Holy of Holies also have sexual parts in them, or they are?
So we'll never know because we don't have the ark. The reason why we can discuss this is because in 1679, it would appear as if it was socially acceptable to have this type of artwork on the cover page of a Bible. It was socially acceptable. Now, I will tell you, in the Talmud, it does say that the cherubs on top of the ark, one was masculine, one was a male child, and one was a female child.
Oh,
It does say that in the Talmud. Okay. Excellent.
Rabbi, Beverly has a question.
I'm sorry.
I only know like if it's so important to know who the two people are, but I was trying to see, because it's hard to see, make it bigger. The one on the left has a pointer, like he's pointing to something. Is that important what he's pointing to?
So
This is why I was saying that it
were you able to, did I make it big enough? Can you guys see this bigger?
Yeah.
So this is really interesting because part of the giving, we're studying the 10 Commandments, and part of the episode of the giving of the 10 Commandments was the sinning of the golden calf. So if you look really closely, I don't see the sinning of the golden calf anywhere. Do you?
No, the golden calf does not appear here.
Doesn't appear here. Now, the other thing is, what does appear here, if you look carefully, you see some people have
Yeah,
fallen. Here you see people who have fallen.
Mhm.
People who are fallen. Everyone is pointing, and if you look closely, this person looks like he's with their hands up. Oh no, oh no, oh no. So if you remember, that's actually also a Jewish tradition in the Talmud about what happened at the give that there was the cacophony is the term they use frequently, is that the loud noise, the blowing of the so one of the questions asked was trumpets. Does anyone see the trumpets?
No.
Yeah, by the clouds.
These are trumpets, blowing sound. Now, if you
Rabbi, do you think that might be maybe the second time when he comes, not the first time when the golden calf is there?
so the second time there wasn't any fanfare. Sorry, there wasn't any fanfare. There wasn't a big to do. So if you remember when we did receive the Ten Commandments, it was so loud, it was so much that the people said we can't take it anymore. And that's why if you do the gematria of Torah, it comes out to 611. You know what? I'm going to annotate it real quickly because I think I see people say, what? I saw one face go, what? So let me write the word Torah here. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
I'm writing the word Torah.
Yeah.
So the gematria of Torah is 400, 6, 200, and 5. What does that come out to? 611. Wait a minute. Aren't there 613 commandments in the Torah? We were too shy. So according to the tradition is that the children of Israel heard the first two. I am the Lord your God, okay, but the noise was great. You shall have no other gods besides. It was like too much for them already. The noise, the intensity, they weren't spiritually prepared for that loud spiritual, statement. And they said, please God, no more, no more. And that's why it had to go through Moses. And when Moses came down 40 days later, he gave us each one of the specific, the additional 611. So let me see if I can close that down.
Rabbi, so
Yes.
the person with the staff on the left, then if all this is going down, maybe it's Aaron telling the people, look, Moses is coming and look what you're doing here in the camp. All the destructions that they caused with the golden calf and all that, that's the only thing that I can interpret with the person on the left, because he has a staff in his hand.
Let me just emphasize that we're studying the Ten Commandments tonight because this weekend on Shabbat, this is the Torah portion of Yitro when we read the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments is so focal to the Jewish community and to Judaism that on the front page of this, was it 340-year-old Bible, they could have done anything, the slitting of the Red Sea, Isaac, the binding of Isaac, Joseph and the many, of all the great narratives in the entire Torah, hitting the rock, Abraham, Sodom, Gomorrah, I mean, all these great stories, what is on the cover page? And the answer is the Ten Commandments, the receiving of the Torah. It is a focal point in our being a Jewish people, because a nation without laws, are they really a civilization? You know what? That's also worthy to stop for just a minute. What makes a people a nation? Food? No, because I eat pizza, I eat pasta, doesn't make me Italian.
Well, the United States was made by a constitution.
Objectives. An objective.
My opinion, there's culture and there's civilization. My opinion, what made us a civilization is laws. Abiding by laws, you're no longer a tribe, You're no longer a clan. Now you're a civilization. Civilizations abide by law. You know, well, we're culturally Western European. You know, we're culturally Western. Or, I don't know. I think that we're a civilization because we abide by a constitution, by a system of laws. By the way, if you go back, actually, I have a slide. Guess guess how many words there are in the Ten Commandments. I'll give you a hint. It's not 613, but it's close. The answer is there's 620 words in the Ten Commandments. Rabbi, where did they come up with that one? Why did God do 620? And the answer is 613. And before the Torah, how many laws were there? Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. The 7 laws of the people, the descendants of Noah. 613 plus 7, 620. How many words are in the Ten Commandments?
172.
600.
172.
Well, I just found this whole discussion on 620.
No,
So
the Ten Commandments.
I'll show it to you. Hold on a second. Let's go there.
600.
172.
Well, I'll show you the text. Well, you know what? Why don't we? Oh, here we go. 648. Oops. Well, I'll find it for us next week because it's already 5 to 8, and I promised questions. I'll show it to you. Where the introduction, the 10 Commandments, and the process immediately after is 620 words. I'll show it to you, and specifically in the text. I have that slide. I wanted to open up for questions. Are there any questions that we could entertain? Anything about?
I think one of the important things about a nation is their ability to defend themselves militarily together, depending whether it's a state or a country. Without
That's a
that,
very
you don't have a
interesting
country.
idea. Does that mean
Well-
for the 2,000 years until the establishment of the state, after the destruction of the temple, we had a brief independent country under Bar Kokhba from 135 to 138 of the Common Era. But other than that, we never had a nation, and we could never defend ourselves as a people. There were incidences, but never as a people.
Well, there's a
Rabbi, this
difference
is what-
between a state and a nation.
So Liliana, what's your definition defining the two?
You can have a
State is
nation or
borders, no?
nations within a state.
Say that again, Liliana.
You can have a nation or nations within a state.
Yeah.
And the state, actually,
It
it's a
is
modern,
physical, Liliana, borders, no? Would you
yes,
say?
Well, it's not
Yes.
just borders. For example, in North Carolina, there's the Cherokee Nation. In the Northeast, there's the Sioux Nation.
Yeah, that's what Liliana's
I think
saying.
That
that,
was,
you
They
know,
made the
we
state.
created that. We created those lands for those people. They weren't, they were,
Jack, I think they would disagree.
no, we did. They weren't living in one small, just like we have the Seminoles here. Seminoles lived in this entire state at one time.
Okay, I hear you. By the way, the Cherokee, where the Cherokee now are, was not their ancestral
We
home
moved them
either.
around.
Right. We forcibly, it was
Forcibly.
the death march. I forgot what the March of the Dead.
Right.
No more the tears,
something-
the
March
tears.
of Tears,
Yes, that's
Trail
what
of
it is.
Tears.
Yeah,
Trail
Trail
of
of
Tears.
Tears.
Right.
Could culture be laws a derivative of a law within the concept of that's our culture?
Rabbi,
So to answer you, Frank, the derivatives of laws. So it's very interesting that we as Jews cannot deny that halakha has definitively changed over the last 2,000 years, and it continues to change. So for example, it's continuing to change. So there's an institute in Jerusalem called the Tzomot Institute of Applied Halakha. And these are the wisest of the wise of the greatest rabbis of our generation. Most of them actually have PhDs, in physics and chemistry and applied earth sciences. So for example, I just read a fantastic tshuva because of our new microphone system in the new sanctuary. So, you know, the idea is there was this whole question. I'll give you an example. In the 1950s, how halacha has changed. In the 1950s, the classic question was, can you use an electric menorah? Can you use an electric menorah? Because before 1950s, you think there were electric menorahs?
No.
There weren't.
Biggest
So the question is, can you make a bracha on the electric menorah? So the Orthodox rabbi said it's really problematic, because if we're saying you can't turn on a light because it's fire, on Shabbat, you can't turn on a light. It's fire. Well, if it's fire, then you should be able to use it for an electric menorah. So the rabbis, you know, they hemmed and they hawed and they said, listen, if you don't have anything else, okay, fine. But it's better not to make a bracha on electric, but you can definitely use it in public for the second part of the mitzvah, which is pirsum hanes, to publicize the miracle. But that being said, it is now developed in the opposite direction, where no Orthodox Jew in his right mind will tell you today that I don't care what they said 72 years ago, you're not making a bracha on the electric menorah. But initially, they said, look, we can't have it both ways. If you're not allowed to turn on the light because it's Shabbos, because it's fire, well, if electricity is fire, then you're allowed to use it for a menorah.
Rabbi,
That's one example. And I'll remind you that the Hebrew word for Jewish law is halacha. Holech means to walk, to move. Jewish law is never stagnant. By definition, Jewish law is constantly evolving. And that's why I was just reading this whole issue. We're having not problems. We're having, you know, discussion about our microphone system. It's supposed to be okay by the Tzomah Institute, but we're having a specific issue with the LED lights that go on and off. They were supposed to, our amplifier was supposed to not have them, and it showed up with these LED lights. So after speaking with one of the people in charge of this particular issue, they said on a scale of 1 to 10, incandescent lights are the worst. What's incandescent? The old-fashioned light bulbs? Jewish law says, come on, it gets hot as hell. You ever try and change a hot light bulb? You can start, you know, do you ever have like a lace hit a light bulb and the lace catches on fire? It's hot enough to cause a fire. So it produces light and it produces extreme heat. So incandescent is the worst when it comes to using electricity on Shabbat. Second is, do you remember mercury light bulbs? For a while, we were like 3 to 5 years, they were so dangerous. Every time they would break, I had them in my house. They broke all the time. You remember their like squiggly things? You had mercury vapor in your house. It's one of the most toxic poisons known to man is mercury. And it's a vapor. You absorb it through your lungs. It was horrible. But halachically, there was no metal heating up and turning into a fire. You were exciting the electrons in the gas, in the mercury vapor. After that was halogen. Remember halogen? Halogen is also a gas. It's like neon. The electricity flows through it. It excites the electrons in the gas and it glows. But the whole point is, as you get further and further down to more and more halachically acceptable, LEDs. The amount of electricity that an LED uses is almost minuscule. And it gets so small that you can barely measure it. Anything less than a sixth of an amp, a sixth of a watt, you can't, and 0.25 amps, you can't even measure it. You have to get like a $400 device. So the whole idea is, that's the first thing, you're barely using electricity. And second of all, there's zero, by definition, it's a light emitting diode. That diode doesn't get hot. You're producing zero heat. So it's not producing heat, and it's not burning a tungsten or metal strip. So in the whole scheme of things, halakha is constantly changing and constantly evolving. And if you're going to ask me, does that mean I'm going to turn on an LED light? No, it's not in the spirit of Shabbat.
Rabbi,
There are other issues involved. And that's like, you know, like we were talking last week about cloned meat being parov. Yep. A lot of people were really upset about that. But halachically, even Rabbi David Lau, the chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel, said, not only is it kosher, it's going to be parov. But what Rabbi Soloveitchik said, just because it's permitted doesn't mean it's allowed. we're going to lose the whole philosophical attitude.
Right.
Everything that's
Rabbi.
permitted shouldn't be allowed.
Rabbi,
Mike, I think you wanted to add something. Yes.
yes, guess what is not in the Siddur?
Say what?
Guess what is not in the Siddur?
What's not in the Siddur?
The Ten
Ten
Commandments.
Commandments.
So, hold on just a second. I have a funeral tomorrow and the family's texting. So, Mike, do you have an art scroll? What type of Siddur do you have?
I have an article.
So if you look after the davening, the Shacharit davening, you'll see there that the art scroll, has added a number of pages. And one of them is Shloshasei Ikarim, the 13 principles of Moses,
Right.
of Maimonides. Another one is Tfilat HaParnasah, a prayer for income. And then if you find it also, now there's two art scrolls. One has a black cover and one has a brown cover. One is the RCA and one is the Schattenstein. One of them, I think it's the black one, has on one of those pages the 10 Commandments. It also has the 8 levels of charity. What do you mean there are 8 levels of charity?
Yep.
Does anyone know what the 8 levels of charity are?
The most important one is that when you don't know who you're giving to, and the guy doesn't know who you're receiving.
Right. Besetim.
That's the highest level of charity. And Rambam also adds, and you don't wait to be asked.
Mhm.
You don't wait to be asked. You don't know who's receiving it, and the recipient doesn't know who the donor was. And the least holiest is someone puts out their hand and says, please, can you give me something? And you give. It's still a mitzvah, but it's not the holiest level of the mitzvah. So there are, very important concept. And what I hope to do is next week when we have the class, we'll be able to discuss the very fundamentalist spirit. We'll get more spiritual aspects of the now, although it's 8:05 and class is officially
Rabbi,
over.
could you repeat?
I just wanted to add that there are 2 more questions. Go ahead,
Could you
Regina.
repeat what he said about the giving? I couldn't hear him well.
Okay. So the answer is there are 8 levels of giving. The lowest level of tzedakah is when someone puts out their hand and says, please, sir, I'm hungry. Please, ma'am, I haven't eaten in 2 days. And you give him $20. Well, what do you mean, Rabbi? I gave him $20. 1, you waited to be asked. 2, he knows who's giving him the money. You know who the recipient is. So that's the lowest level. So let's get to the opposite side of the spectrum. What's the holiest? Let's say you heard about 7,000 people killed in Turkey. You heard about it. You don't wait until Federation sends an email. You call the International Red Cross, you call Federation, whatever it is, and you say, I want to give $100 to help the victims in Turkey. Now, they'll never know your name, and you'll never know who gets the $100. That's the holiest.
Okay.
You don't wait to be asked. You don't know the recipient, and the recipient doesn't know the donor.
Rabbi, can I say something?
Absolutely, Your Honor.
For me personally, not knowing who it goes to cannot be holier than deciding on what is most important and prioritizing who you give your money to.
So can you be a little bit more specific?
For example, if I had to choose between the people in Israel who are needy, the Holocaust survivors who are old and need things, and the Boy Scouts, you can guess where it would go.
To
Because
the Jewish
it's not
Boy
the-
Scouts in Israel?
Well, if I had to choose between those two, there are ones. But what I mean to say is that there are some causes that are more worthy, that are more in need, that are more emergent, and just saying, oh, I'm giving money and not
So-
knowing where you're going to distribute it or how it's going to go, I think it's a sin.
So in addition to, although there's a hierarchy of the holiness of tzedakah, you should know that Rambam also has hilchot tzedakah, the laws of giving tzedakah. And the laws are, first, you have to give to family members who need money. Second, you give to members in your neighborhood who need money. Then you give to members in your community that need money, that need help. Then you give money to people in your state. And then you give to people further away, with the exception of the state of Israel. That was called the Yishuv. And although Maimonides didn't live in the era of collecting for the Yishuv, the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Ursulus, did qualify that supporting the Jews in the Yishuv, in the land of Israel, in the late 1600s, that did definitely have a priority. But that being said, you can still give to Israel, and the recipient won't know who you are, and you won't know who the recipient is.
Rabbi, I have a question.
But also, wait, one more thing. Rambam also adds that the holiest level of tzedakah is not to give a man a fish, but to teach the man to fish.
Fish, right.
Okay, so that's also that's the next level.
Right.
But the reality of it is, I don't know how to fish.
But you know how to be a rabbi, so that's good.
I don't have to begin to tell you how many times I put a dead worm or a shrimp on a fish and throw it in there 50 times and nothing happens. So I can't teach anybody.
Get him to get a job.
Rabbi, tithing is not a part of tzedakah, right?
No, tzedakah is completely alternative.
Because one of the levels,
Giving-
I know the lessest level, the lesser of all, supposedly be the one that you give unwillingly, like since you're forced to give. So would that be considered as tithing?
So if you're commanded to do something, is it still charity? So you should know that the Hebrew word for charity is tzedakah, and the root word of tzedakah is tzedek, which means justice. So when you give charity, which comes from the Greek word charitus, charity, charitus, that means it comes from the Greek word that means mercy. In Judaism, when you give tzedakah, you're not having mercy on a person. You're doing justice for that person. So our attitude is different. And so if you are commanded to do something, is it the same thing as doing something willfully because of menschlichkeit? So those are really great questions. Well, Chevra, it's 10 after 8. Listen, it's always a bracha to study Torah with anyone. God willing, I know a number of people wanted to attend tonight. Actually, 4 people were nice enough to call me or text me to say they couldn't make it tonight. So you notice class was a little thin. I think we had 25 at the end. A little thinner than usual, but a lot of people. I would be greatly amiss if I didn't make the following announcement. It pains me greatly. Everyone that we lose is always a pain and suffering to the community. But unfortunately, it pains me to announce the passing of Reb Isaac Zeltzer, one of the great menschlich people of our patriarchal generations of Temple Menorah. Just an amazing neshama. He passed away late last night, and the funeral will be tomorrow at Levitt Weinstein Blasberg. I believe it's called for 10:30. And 10:15, it's called for 10:15. So God willing, we should be able to go there and show our respects to one of our great, great community leaders. Past president of Federation, the first Latin president of Federation, by the way. Just an amazing, good person. So we miss him dearly. And our hearts go out to Loli, his beloved wife, his kids. There's Alan, who's married to Ruth. There's Robin, married to Richard. There's Ellen, married to Oscar. Many, many grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. So he's sorely missed. And I took this extra few minutes because
Yes.
I'm looking around at the
Thank you.
class, and we all knew him, we all loved him. So
I
God
also,
willing,
I
we'll see
also
you
had the
tomorrow.
honor of teaching some of their grandchildren. Yeah.
The Almond grandchildren,
Yeah.
the Feldenkrais grandchildren. The Zeltzers, absolutely. Yeah, good family, very dynamic, very positive.
Rabbi, Rabbi,
Yes,
I remember him being our bus leader on the 50th anniversary of Israel. And that was something that'll never leave my mind. It was such a wonderful time. He was such a wonderful leader.
he was a very classy man, very classy, very soft-spoken, brilliant man, brilliant
Very
businessman,
humble,
brilliant.
a very humble man.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. One of the things I'll share with you tonight that I'm gonna share tomorrow. I once invited him to call me Elliot, and this was his response. You're my rabbi. I will never call you by your first name. So I said to him, Isaac, I'm younger than your children. And he goes, you're my rabbi. And that's it. And like, I would periodically leave him a message. It's Elliot. And he would call me up and he goes, Rabbi, is this Rabbi Perlsid? Like, no, you're my rabbi.
That's
So,
why I call
just a,
you rabbi too.
just a,
Rabbi, does tzedakah always have to be money? I
no,
ask mitzvahs because
no.
yeah, because I would say, I don't know if the people know, but I retired last year, but I taught at Hillel for many years. And I had one year, my students were so rude and so mean to each other. And I had Rabbi Perlson come to my school and he was talking to my kids. And it was amazing what you did. And I don't think you realize what happened after. But he showed pictures of in biblical, like this one had a limp and this one had this and all the, different physical things. And he said to him, who created these people? And the kids go, Hashem. It was fourth grade at the time. And who created them? Hashem. And then the rabbi said, well, if you're making fun of somebody, you're making fun of Hashem. And I thought that was so beautiful what you said. And my kids, after that, we kept saying, if someone did something, my kids were telling other classes, the kids, you're making fun of Hashem. It was so cute. You had such an impact on those kids. So that really was not just a mitzvah, but that was, tzedakah really was,
So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, actually, he was the founder of the Musar movement. And basically, what was the Musar movement? He found, and we're talking about, like in the late 1700s, early 1800s, that Jews were observing every letter of the law to ad nauseum, but were lacked menschlichkeit. And the Musar movement means the ethical movement, the movement to be ethical. So there's so many great stories about him. One of my favorite stories about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was that he was visiting in another town, and the rabbi and everyone wanted to be with Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. So the rabbi of the community invited like 50 people to a Friday night dinner at his home. And when they walked in from synagogue Friday night, they sang Shalom Aleichem, they made Kiddush, and then they walked into an area to wash their hands for a hamotzi. Now, what happened was Rabbi Yisrael Salanter fills up the washing dili, the madlan, and he took the minimum amount of water and he washed only his knuckles. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Not 3 times, not a full cup on each hand. The minimal amount, like 1.8 ounces, and only the first nut. And everyone saw that. How strange was that? And then they made him, and one of the great rabbis sitting at the table said, Rabbi, would you mind explaining to us why you use the minimal amount, which is the way you wash your hands on Tisha B'Av, or the way you wash your hands in the morning on Yom Kippur? Why do you wash that way on Shabbat? You should celebrate and use a full cup 3 times and another 3 cups. So he said, when we were walking back from synagogue, I noticed that the kitchen maid, the young girl who worked in the kitchen, was schlepping water using a yoke. You know what a yoke is? It was a wooden spark, right? Schlepping water from the community well, a kilometer away, because no one had indoor water. You had to go to the pump or the well to get water. And he said, that poor girl has to schlep all the water so all of you can wash your hands. I don't want to earn a mitzvah off the back-breaking work of a poor girl in the kitchen.
Good for him.
So that was the great Yisrael Salon. So he also said something very, very important, which is relative to what you just said. Sometimes tzedakah can be a kind word. I'll give you an example. Once I was walking on Miami Beach, not important where, and a homeless person comes over to me with Shabbat and said, "Please, sir, you're a holy person. Can you please, can you give me some spare change?" So I looked at him and I took him both by his elbows, you know, because one of the first things that homeless people, they're not so clean. They have hygiene issues. But I felt horrible. I didn't have any money. You know why? It was Shabbos. So I took him by the elbows and I go, "I'm so sorry. Today is my Sabbath. I don't carry any money. I'm so sorry, but can I give you a blessing instead?" And the guy like welled up and, you know, and he said, "Thank you. That's just as good as money." Now, I don't tell that story too often because it's very self-serving. You know, it makes me feel like a holy person. So I don't like telling that particular story, but that's maybe I should next time I'll tell the story in third person about a rabbi. But the whole point is that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter is right. Sometimes a kind word is worth more than a large, you know, check.
You know, you're saying that, it just reminds me of a real quick story. When I was at the mall, like before, it was before COVID, and this young guy, he held the door open. I wasn't even near the door. I was coming from the parking lot, and he held the door for me. And I said to him, I said, "Thank you so much." I said, "Your mother really raised you to be, a kind person." And he started tearing up. He said, "Thank you. I'm on my way to the cemetery. I'll tell her." So he was so excited that I said that to him, you know. So you never know when you say something to someone, the impact, like you said, just one word. Look what your mother, raised, and then
I'll tell you another story about a rabbi. So do you know that dollar store on 163rd Street? Actually, it's not 160. I think it's called Eastern Shores. There's a Winn-Dixie.
Yeah.
You know, there used to be a movie theater between Biscayne Boulevard and Collins Avenue. There used to be a movie theater, and there's a dollar store there. So this rabbi had to go in there for something, you know, cheap sunglasses, and there was a girl in front of this rabbi had extremely red, extremely kinky red hair that was all over the place. And this girl did not look like a happy camper. So we're waiting in line at this rabbi's waiting in line at the dollar store. And so I said to her, can I just say one thing? And she turns around, "You talking to me?" So I go, "I think your hair is fantastic. I love it." Is that like, oh my God. It's true. My first crush was a redheaded girl. And like, I was old enough to be her grandfather. And she goes, "Thank you. I only get made fun of. Thank you. I really appreciate it." And that's why I do that all the time. I did it when I was in New York for a bris 2 weeks ago. I did the same thing in New York, but it was a little kid that had obviously, was wearing like crazy clothes. So I walked over to this. I would say the kid was like 12, 13. I said something to him. I go, "You don't know me? You're never going to see me again? I love what you're wearing. I think you are amazing." He goes, "Really? They make fun of you at school." I go, "Absolutely not. I think you're great. And you got cojones, to dress like that." Like it made, and the kid will never see me again. He'll never remember. And by the way, I wasn't wearing a yarmulke. I was wearing a hat because it was freezing cold. Remember that? So like, I should have taken off my hat so you could see I was wearing a yarmulke. So sometimes a kind word is actually better. Not better. Nothing's better than pastrami sandwich when you're hungry, but just as good as a good pastrami sandwich, with mustard and rye, All right, Chevra, I'm hungry. I made myself hungry.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm gonna go eat dinner.
much.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Lila Tov, it's good to see all these new faces. Lila Tov, everyone.
Good night.
Rabbi.